everyone. This is Jackie Cooper with CryptoMom2 Talk Show, and I would like to welcome everyone to this episode and remind everyone to like and subscribe because we have a lot of great conversations that are about to drop, and I want to make sure that you're always in the know of what's going on in our blockchain community. Today, I have a really interesting guest on that I discovered on LinkedIn, and I know that all of you are going to have a question or two because we're going to be talking about blockchain, Web3, artificial intelligence, and he's an expert in his field. And I definitely invite you to reach out to him so that way he can support you in your ventures. Before I pop over to him, though, for those that might not be aware of my background, I'll give you a little bit of history. I am an attorney. I'm also an author of the Bitcoin Cinderella series, and I'm also an educator. And I believe that, as a part of this blockchain community, we all have a need to mentor others and to provide reliable resources so that way each one of us can grow and be uplifted because this is a field that is constantly evolving. And with that, I will share a little bit at the end of our conversation more about the Blockchain Legal Institute. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview about Blockchain Legal Institute because it's not just for lawyers, it's really for everyone who steps forward into the blockchain space because we're all impacted by laws, whether it's policy, whether it's legislation, whether it's case law that happens just here in the United States as well as around the world. So really the Blockchain Legal Institute is for those that are new to this space, that are just trying to learn what an NFT is, what Bitcoin is, what Ethereum is, what blockchain is, or whether you're more experienced and you want to know if you're in compliance. So it's for both the lawyers who are advising as well as those that are the users in the space as well. With that, I would like to thank everyone for staying on to the very end so that way you can learn more about the Blockchain Legal Institute and also more of how you can reach my guest. And I want to welcome JP over to the CryptoMom2 Talk Show. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, Jackie. It's been great meeting and talking with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in your podcast series.
Yeah, you have a really interesting background. And as we started talking, I learned, how deep it is in terms of knowledge. And we're going to be talking about, artificial intelligence because you are an applied AI expert, but you also have knowledge about the economics of Web3 and blockchain. And you've written a number of articles on a variety of topics. Before we get started on some of our content, why don't you share a little bit more about your history? How did you even get into the blockchain world? Because even that part is really fascinating.
Well, I didn't get into it early enough. That's a shame. I mean, typically I would have been the guy buying pizzas and playing poker with it, but I was unfortunately busy with the economics of growing a family and took my eye off that part of the ball. Plus, I was involved in more enterprise technology when this was kind of an outlier, right? But I mean, I knew it was coming. I had obviously been involved with PayPal, using PayPal as far back as 1997. I integrated PayPal for my firewall.
Wow.
When I had my analyst firm, and I was putting content, subscriber content behind the firewall, in front of the firewall, and actually did a presentation at a conference integrating with one of the first the first instance of the PayPal API. So I was knowledgeable about payments. I had done B2B payments for a number of years as well, but not that the blockchain got me. I missed the early boat on that window, but I call myself a surfer. I've been surfing the technology wave since I was young, always out there on the outer edge of the emerging technology. It's an area of interest. And I think one of the things that I noticed about myself early on is that I was gifted with the ability to rapidly be able to understand the emerging technology and then be able to explain it to others in a way that made it digestible for them. And we'll get into this more with the AI stuff because I just wrote a post this morning on LinkedIn that was, that touches upon this whole area to some degree. But that, my wave was, out of the gate, Windows 1.0 was building for that, and then Java 1.0 alpha, I was building on that, and it just took off from there. Everything Corba and DC and RMI and DCOM and the whole distributed for enterprise financial services early on, and that led to cloud and web services. And I was Mr. XML for a while. Everything that was XML, I was basically on top of. So you get on this wave, and it kind of just feeds itself, one point to the next point, to the next point, especially when you're in the enterprise, because the enterprise is always looking for the next thing. And so you conferences, you're speaking, you're part of these audiences. For example, I was chairing a Java conference, and a company called Data Channel showed up, knew who I was as a Java analyst, came over and said, "You got to see this XML stuff. It's the next biggest thing," right? So, it kind of breeds on itself. And so for me, being somebody who's deeply involved with distributed computing technologies, blockchain's a huge technological feat. I mean, the ability to have the equivalent of what we call in the enterprise XA level asynchronous transaction management distributed across an anonymous network, and have it be non-repudiating. It's a phenomenal feat, just that in of itself. Anyone who's ever done value-added networks, EDI, can tell you what a phenomenal feat blockchain is when it's used in that way, right? I mean, certainly there's a lot, I think, that is whitewashed about blockchain, that I could have used Oracle journaling databases or MongoDB journaling databases and gotten the same result from a solutions perspective. But you start to get into the need for anonymous networking and being able to handle non-repudiated transactions across boundaries. And all of a sudden, there's nothing like it.
So you've used a lot of words that some of my listeners might not understand.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's really good, because I'm all about making sure that everyone is leveled in the playing field, and also understands the technology as well as the terminology. So I love it.
Please ask me to clarify anything.
I will.
Well,
sure. So someone that has heard about blockchain might not have heard the word distributed ledger. Is it the same? Is it different? Explain, maybe, for those that might be new to this area, because a lot of terms are always thrown out, and sometimes they're interchangeable, but sometimes there are nuances.
Sure. For me, I mean, I'm sure you get into esoterics, and somebody in my network who's extremely technical will be happy to pinpoint the exact reason why they're not the same. 50,000 foot view, 20,000 foot view. It's generally the same concept. The key here is what we call the consensus mechanism. The ability that anybody can set up and join a blockchain network by setting up a node and having that node introduced and registered into the network. Now you can become a consensus partner in that transaction. So when a transaction goes out, when somebody says, "I'm going to pay Susie $15, I'm taking it out of my account, okay, and I'm giving it to Susie." Now, the first thing to understand about this whole environment is it's not your bank. It's not Wells Fargo. There is no account where your money is sitting there tied to a number in a vault. It's actually the first transaction in the ledger where the exchange converted some whatever, and you get your tokens. That's your bank account now. That is your last sum. And because you can't change the ledger without being destructive to the entire ledger, you can trust that the information in it is valid. So your record, your first entry in the ledger, represents the creation of your account and how much you have in it. And when you want to send Susie, you have 200 in that first entry, and you send Susie 50, the next transaction is not your current balance like you have on the old passbooks, or it's minus 50. And the way your balance is determined is by looking at all your transaction and summarizing what your current state is. And so you'd see the 200, you'd see the minus 50, you have a positive, right, account balance. So that's the first thing to understand. Now, when you send Susie that 50, what happens is you send it to the network, right? And then the underlying technology is all about how am I going to store that, right? And that's where blocks come into account. That's where mining comes into account, because somebody is, going out there and figuring out how to allocate the space for that data. And then, so that's the underlying mechanism. That's the blockchain piece. And then the currency piece, the Bitcoin on top of it, that's where now that it has a place to live, it gets stored, okay? But before that can happen, not everybody, a number of nodes in the network need to now all agree that that transaction's valid. So all the nodes vote and say, yeah, I see it, it's valid. I see it, it's valid. You get enough consensus. You can then, accurately state enough nodes have seen this transaction to determine that it can't be fraudulent. Let's write it into the block, and everybody gets a copy of that block. Now the ledger's updated, and all the checksums over that block being added are now in everybody's copy of the ledger. And so it cannot be changed, because any change to the data, each node, each block uses the blocks before it to accumulate a checksum. And so you can't find the piece of data that you could change that would allow you to benefit, but also not be destructive to the entire link of what came before and what went after. So it's a phenomenal technology that way. And so that underlying piece, that pool of nodes that all sit there watching and saying, yeah, I'll say it's valid. I'll say it's valid, right? In order for the transaction to be written into everybody's block, you have to have that consensus. That is a really difficult problem in distributed computing.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about, because actually I recently became a node owner. I have been a Bitcoin user before. I owned rigs, but I decided to kind of go the node road as well. So I'm learning how to set up, I have the Bitcoin blockchain downloaded on it, and I'm learning how to set up my Bitcoin wallet on there and point of sale. And so it's a fascinating area, and I'm trying to get more into the tech side so I can understand it. So when I have individuals like yourself on, I can ask questions about these things. So it's definitely an amazing technology. We want to kind of navigate over right now to you've what I love about your background is you kept going with the flow of the technology. You kept learning more about, as the technology evolved, you went that path so you could support your clients and who you were working with. So from traditional to even, I hate using the word traditional, because blockchain is more traditional now, even though most people might not understand that it's going to become the norm. Just, as the internet has evolved, so is all this in the commerce side.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
I kind of see where you're going, but I did want to make a point, right? You back to what you had originally stated about what brought, what you often ask other guests, what brought you to this, right? Well, yeah. For me, like early on in the early days of XML was actually a language that was created to define publishing. It's how you would define a book in a very independent way, so that it could be printed by any printing technology. The web is the same way, right? So HTML is actually a derivative of SGML, which was the original publishing language.
Interesting.
XML is also a derivative of SGML, right? So the people who were doing XML, the people who were doing HTML, all came from the publishing world. It was actually all that documentation for the government that, like NASA, the 5 billion volumes on how to launch something into outer space, all SGML. Books in publishers in the early days, all SGML. There is another, text was another one that was popular at the time to describe how, your font, your encoding, spacing, all that describable. Well, the tags were in SGML were the way to say what font you wanted, what attributes, what the way the paragraph should look. I came in and I'm looking at this thing from a different perspective because I came at it from distributed computing perspectives. So I'm talking about, well, this is a great way to describe messages between systems. Because the one thing I have to do every time I have to transfer data between systems is write a parser, something to read that data and transcribe it and turn it back into digital information on the other, package it. So the way it works is you take your data on side A, you package it up, you put it in a certain format, you send it over the wire, you get it off the wire, you have to unpackage it, right? Well, I had to write the thing that packages and unpackages for every application that I ever built that did this. And here was this thing that said, oh, I can write the packager and unpackager once and reuse it everywhere, right? So I started talking about using XML for messaging, and all of a sudden the SGML world was like, the guy who, the G in SGML is Goldfarb. Charles Goldfarb heard me talk about this, and he's like, mind blown, man. You have to write a book in my series, man. You gotta, I love this. This is great. It's, so, and of course, XML became the predecessor to what we use today, which is heavily JSON as a intermediary format on the web. For all those web services, everything that gives you your dynamic updates and your stock price, all of it's now in a format called JSON, J-S-O-N. Before that, it was XML. So obviously it became quite popular. And because of my early in, I was working with Microsoft and Sun Microsystems and IBM and anybody in XML, right? So I got that notion of kind of like seeing things in a different way. Now, why do I bring that up? It's the same thing with blockchain for me. Blockchain was never about the currency for me. It was about supply chain management.
Right, exactly. And which I love that whole area. Yeah.
I saw it from the supply chain management viewport. I didn't even catch on to the financial viewport. I mean, it just wasn't in my purview. It was all about how do I do chain of custody? How do I guarantee the, again, I'm crossing boundaries across networks, think of an airport, right? You have an airline who's giving luggage to a third-party luggage handling service, who's then got to give it to another airline, right? You're crossing boundaries. Those systems, now everybody could log into one default centralized system, but that tends not to be the way it ends up working. It ends up being 3 different systems or 4 different systems. And so, I'm managing the transfer of this physical asset across these systems. So I have an underlying asset. I've tokenized it in a system, right? So I'm doing that. I'm doing what the currency system's doing. I'm just looking at it from a different perspective. Now, I happen to, catch up with one of the seafood manufacturing companies that was actually tracking from fishing to table and the entire supply chain and using blockchain, which was very cool. And then I started, actually talking to some physical suppliers like airline manufacturers and auto manufacturers about operating across their supply chain and using blockchain, and also the marketplace capabilities. I have, a lot of extra spare parts of this particular kind that are overbought. How do I now enter them into a marketplace? Those were all things that we were looking at in the XML EDI days. So when we were using XML to represent EDI, how do you do a marketplace? How do you do an exchange among a group of similar companies, like the Worldwide Retail Exchange, where Walmart's and Sears and all these other companies were together funding this thing as a place to deal with overstock and liquidation, and also just in time, capture of items if they felt like they needed something. How do you do that, right? So to me, that's the thing that attracted me to the blockchain, was the ability to have a network like that was non-repudiated, which means that I have assurances, legal assurances. This is great. I wanted to capture this, the Blockchain Legal Institute, non-repudiation, right? I have a legal supporting capability. I can go to in front of a judge and say, this is a valid, piece of evidence in this particular case, right? Which I think we still have yet to see it used officially in a case in this way. Maybe you have more data on this than I do.
No, I think you're right. Not yet. But again, who knows what's going to be coming down the pike, but I think you're right about that. Yeah.
So that's what brought me to it. Again, my lens was off to the left instead of in front of me. If it was up in front of me, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I'd be on my boat down in the Bahamas, which is behind me, where FTX is.
No, hopefully not where FTX is.
It actually is. That's from Coco Key in the Bahamas, right by Nassau.
So you've navigated this far, and now you're learning about and doing things within the artificial intelligence area. So and you recently wrote an article, which is about a whole nother area. So let's
keep going the way we're going, because I can wrap it up real quick. But one of the things that I have always also been writing about and studying is this idea of what we call the API economy. The whole idea was that, and I mentioned a lot of these technologies along the path here, right? JSON and XML and the messaging, and all that comes down to the API world. So I have an application that I want to extract data from. I want to talk to it. We have companies have built in technological on-ramps and off-ramps to do that. They call them APIs, application programming interfaces. Salesforce has them, ServiceNow has them, Oracle has them. Anybody with real data has them, right? AWS has them, Google has them, Microsoft has them, tons of them, hundreds of thousands of them. They are both public and private ways for a computer program to talk machine to machine to that other application and get data. The difficulty in doing so is that very little of these environments do you want public and open source.
Open source, right?
So what that requires immediately is that I have a system of authentication and authorization that sits over these pieces of data, that I have to validate the incoming message is from a valid participant that can touch and see certain data, that can have certain controls over certain data, that can filter it a certain way and see certain pieces of information. Very expensive to implement that. And then I have to have an entire system to allow you to create yourself as an authenticated party in that system, and probably customer support, so that if something goes wrong, you have somebody to speak to that can fix that problem, right? I just took a very simple problem and I made it a $3 to $4 million a year problem. Okay. And along comes Web3, smart contracts. I have the ability with a smart contract to say, I can collect the funds for this transaction at the time of the request. I can also, based upon your account number, have enough validation that I want to allow this piece of information to be able to give to you. So I'm exposing a block of information in advance. It's predefined, it's prepackaged. I'm selling it to you for $500. You put the Bitcoin into the smart contract envelope. You pay the gas. You issue the transaction. I validate. I get the money, and I send you back your data over the same transaction set through the smart contract. Okay. It's mind-blowing, from the perspective of I can operate anonymously. I can enable an economy where I can sell you data over that network without having that $4 million problem. Just huge. And it's not being utilized at all. Well, it's not being utilized relative to the number of APIs and opportunities that are out there that are still selling the old way. One of the number one areas of data sales, sports data, especially with online sports betting and DraftKings and all that, right? And people who are doing the teams, leagues, right? All tons of data, every sport, lots of statistics, all that's for sale. All of them are behind paywalls that require that $4 million overhead, when you could define it through a smart contract.
So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, for those that are listening, if this is something of interest to you, you need to reach out to JP because he'll be able to help you with that. Am I correct?
I would love to. I'd be very happy to. I love the area. It's something that feeds directly into everything I've worked on, going all the way back to the beginning part of the story, right?
Yeah,
Making two
exactly.
systems talk to one another. But yeah, the ability to leverage this technology, the Web3 technology and smart contracts, and the ability to exchange currency in the same vein, in the same transaction as the request for the data and return that is monumental.
I think it's this is a very important conversation also because as more and more businesses look at ways to rebudget, they to reinvest both in their staff as well as in other services that they might want to explore. The technology is making it easier, but unless you have someone like yourself on their staff or as an outside consultant, they might not know how to transition to use it. So why don't you go ahead,
Well, at least in the early days.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and share how people can reach you? Because even though it's going to be embedded for everyone who's listening, both on the YouTube as well as on the talk show side, go ahead and share how people can reach you.
Yeah, I actually created an email address specifically for this podcast. It's blockchain@jpmorgenthal.com. That's JPMorgenthal.com.
Yep. So if anyone who's listening has questions about any or all of this, definitely, reach out to JP. I know that we're going to have more conversations because your knowledge base is so broad, and the shows normally are 20 to 30 minutes long. So we want to kind of keep it in a targeted way, but I definitely—
Can I leave a hook? Can I leave a hook?
Of course.
Let's take it all the way. Let's take it all the way to the AI real quick. Okay.
Go right ahead.
We talked about smart contracts. We talked about Web3.
Yeah.
What's the number one thing that AI, these new large language models need in order to really be specialized to your purpose? They need training data.
Yes.
So you now have a marketplace where you can sell data. You have the technology to enable selling data, right? You can now use that Web3 technology to actually open up entire opportunities to build capacity for training, for exchange of data for training, to do the work and actually pass back pointers to the large language models that are finely tuned. I think it's just a small piece of where I think the collision of AI and blockchain comes together. I'm sure you could have a Wall Street expert come on and talk about arbitrage with this stuff, but and I spoke of something briefly earlier about what I wrote this morning about, we finally have an answer to our kids' question, why do I need math? It was always a difficult question. It really was. To count. All right, great. I can count. I got fingers. I got a calculator. Now I got a smartphone. You need to understand calculus, because we now know the entire world, including our language, is predictable through calculus. Now, as I wrote in my post this morning, it's awful for me because I had the worst teachers for trig and calc. And I'm the type who needs that one nugget. If I get that one nugget of a concept about something, the entire universe of it opens up and I can understand it. And I could never get that from the teachers I had. Even read calculus for cats. It didn't help. But all of this AI, generative AI stuff, it's derivative calculus. It's all
Wow.
based on derivative calculus.
Ha,
And
interesting.
so, yeah. And so our language, like you and I were talking about this the other day, our language is predictable through derivative calculus. The path of words and their proximity to one another in a multidimensional space is derivative calculus. It also means that everything that generative AI gives you right now is a derivative work over something it's seen in the past.
Right. Right. You know, this is fascinating to me because in college, I've loved math. Up until my calculus days, I was very good at it.
Thank you. I had 98 on the algebra, exam, the final exam. Missed one question. Trig blew me out of the water, and I never got it back.
So, you know, I had a professor, Professor Asprey, who she was a phenomenal woman and worked at Los Alamos and some other places, you know,
Oh,
way
lucky you.
before, women were in a lot of these high tech, high math area fields. Brilliant, brilliant mind. But she she was my calculus teacher. And, you know, again, wasn't a reflection on her. It was just a reflection on me. But now I understand why, you know, it was so important for me to kind of go that path. I kept thinking, why am I taking this? Why am I taking this? Well, AI.
We didn't know. We
No, I
really
have
didn't
no
know. Even the AI I had done in my past was all graph oriented. It really
clue.
wasn't.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is derivative calculus, and it is. Sure, you don't need derivative to understand derivative calculus to use prompt engineering, but if you really want to make, one of these models sing and dance or fine tune it, and you kind of have to have enough understanding of derivative calculus in order to appreciate how to build the multi-dimensional spaces and do math over them.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating to me, just like when I became a Bitcoin miner, to understand the mathematical calculation that the rigs were doing in order to create the coin, in order to validate the transactions like you talked about. I mean, everything was mathematical, and it just and done in a way that machine driven. You know, yes, minds are phenomenal, but sometimes it's the machines that are going to be a little bit more efficient. So awesome conversation, everyone. I'm going to hop over really quickly to the Blockchain Legal Institute, just to kind of give you a little tour of, what it is that you can do by being a member. I mean, for sure, when you hop on, JP, can you see this? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because again, double view on the video side. So we have the learn section with a variety of tools. We also have an AI section, which I know that JP is going to be writing more about, and we're going to talk him into blogging for us. There's Bitcoin, Ethereum, the whole blockchain area, Web3, everything, US laws, everything around the world, member perks, associations that are also associated, for lawyers, for those, not everyone has to be a lawyer to join. In fact, all of us are impacted by law, but for those that are in the law area, how to support your clients. We are associated with the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, events for those that want to travel or find local events, and member spotlight. So, again, navigate, go to the Blockchain Legal Institute at bli.tools. There's a free side, there's a subscription side. But again, it's a networking community, and it's a decentralized, we're living in a decentralized world, but this is a centralized hub, which saves time for you when you're doing your research and when you want to find a referral, like, JP or someone else that might have a skill set that you need. So again, I welcome everyone to go over and explore and to let us know what else you need, because we're here to serve. So JP, thank you so much. Any last minute thoughts before we sign off?
I pretty much did my brain dump for the day, but I thank you again for inviting me on. This has been great. Look forward to speaking with you more. And to your audience, again, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. And remember, everyone, his email is definitely going to be embedded in the blog below. Definitely reach out to him. He's a knowledgeable individual that can consult with your business. And as I always say to everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We are also interconnected. We're all part of one world, and now even more than ever. So everyone, have a great day. Definitely remember, like and subscribe so that way you can hear more conversations that will drop. Have a great day, guys.